South Africa is a country that prides itself in its history, culture, and its heritage. Although its history is painful for the majority of the people living in this land, our country, it therefore becomes very important to document the true history of this country. This is the Insight Factor, and my name is Thabo Makwakwa. Today we're joined by Mike Stainbank, and I want to quote something that he actually wrote here, which I find very interesting. So it says, "We endure a society that will gloss over prejudice as though it were just anomaly, unconnected to the historical roots of racism. Leading this amnesia is a government that assumes the position, too weak and too fearful to respond to overwhelming evidence of systemic problem," unquote. Mr. Mike Stainbank, welcome to the Insight Factor.
Thank you very much. Nice. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, for those who do not know you, who is Mike Stainbank?
Well, let me tell you about Mike Stainbank from what might be a funny point of view. My actual names are Arnold Michael Stainbank. My mother was a devout Catholic. My father would have nothing whatsoever to do with religion. And so what happened was that it was my mother that went to baptize me. So when my mother baptized me, she got to the church, and if you know anything about the missionary movement, you had to be in line. So I think the agreement was between the two of them, Arnold Michael Stainbank, and so they get there, and the priest insists that the first name should have something to do with the Bible. So she baptizes me as Michael Arnold, all right? And so I go through, 8 years of school, so I'm Mike. And so when I get to standard 6, they demand the birth certificate. When the birth certificate emerges, it's my father that went to register me on the birth certificate. So the birth certificate turns out to be Arnold Michael. So that's the kind of the funny side of what's this thing about Michael Arnold and Arnold Michael. So officially I'm Arnold Michael, but for everybody that knows me, I'm Mike Stainbank. So, but to get to the question that you ask about Mike Stainbank, I am every black South African. My father left home. My father's a musician, and he left home, I think I was about 9 years old, and my mother at that time, there were 4 of us in the family, and my mother was then left with the task of raising us. So in that context, I think that I'm out of a single parent family, and all of my life has been what I describe more as survival. As the eldest son, it became my duty to go out to assist my mother in raising our family. So that, in a nutshell, is through the process of surviving and doing a whole lot of things in the process, I come to where I am a man who has a family. And that's every black South African story in my mind.
Thank you so much. I think it's great to get to know you a little bit there. Now, Mike, you one of the persons who are actually very popular, in the space of social media and elsewhere. But before we get into that, I want to know who are the early influences behind this Mike Stainbank we've come to see today.
Oh, okay. Having grown up in Durban, when I think about my earlier influences, clearly my mother's strength comes out. So that, yeah. But then there are other influences in one's life, and so as one grows up in South Africa, you cannot grow up without some or other political influence. And in that regard, I was very fortunate to be introduced to the Black consciousness movement at a very, very early age. And so my absorption into Black consciousness happens very, very early in my life. And I find myself very often down at the where Steve Biko was and stuff. I didn't have the privilege of meeting him, but yes, that's my beginnings of my political consciousness, yes.
Clearly, Steve Biko played a huge role in your life in influencing your political activism. And I understand that you went to become a person that actually felt that there was something monumental that had to be created, the Apartheid Museum.
Well, let me put that a little bit differently, if you don't mind. There's a misconception that what I had set out to do started off with the words the Apartheid Museum. That's wrong. It's a misconception. In or about Steve Biko dies in 1977. And Thabo, I have to say to you, it must have been what can only be described as a fleeting thought. The fleeting thought that somewhere along we have to document our history and what it has done to it. I cannot tell you anything more than describe it as a fleeting thought. Whether I acted on that thought or not is the question. And I don't know, and I can tell the story because I lived it, and I think many creative people can tell that story. But it's a thought that didn't leave me, and I found myself gravitating to how then would that education be shaped, okay? And it would not be true to say that I sat down with a piece of paper in 1977 and wrote down that this is what I'm going to do. That's not true.
What is it that you said to do?
No, it's a thought that wouldn't leave me. But then what then happens is I gravitate to the how. And I'm not sure how I gravitate to that how. And I'll tell you, one of the things I recall was around about that time, I saw the Nuremberg Trials, and it became an idea in my head, knowing what we have suffered up to that point. And maybe the original thought was along the lines that South Africa needs to go through the Nuremberg Trials. But then this thought would, but this now, I'm talking about 1977, okay? This is after 1976 and in the year that Steve Biko dies, okay? Steve Biko is murdered. He doesn't die, he's murdered. So this thought doesn't leave me, and as the years go on, it is collecting space in my head in terms of how this is going to happen. And then I begin to collect pieces, and it's a whole. If I tell you that it was coordinated, then I'm lying. It wasn't coordinated. It was just, I'm going to need this. I'm going to need this. I'm going to need this. And then it may have been about, 5 years in or something, but let me cut the story short and get to the point where I decide, no, this I am going to do. And by now, I have a fair idea, and I began now to document. And then I invite my friend who is an artist, his name is Ben Omar, and I said, Ben, this is the idea that I have, and I'm able to put it to him. And he begins to sketch. He's listening to me and he's beginning to sketch the first ideas of this major city that we end up with, called the Apartheid Museum complex. So it is in 1990, after the development of all of that, that I registered the trademark, the Apartheid Museum. So it comes to me after I have done my research and development. I decide I need a vehicle under which this would fly. And it's after the development of that I get to these three words, the Apartheid Museum.
Okay, so the Apartheid Museum was registered in 1990.
And I'd like to make the point that it's registered in 1990, where nobody knew that there were secret negotiations with the African National Congress. So when the Registrar of Trademarks receives an application for the Apartheid Museum, he doesn't even have to think. There's no such thing.
Okay, so after having registered this trademark, the Apartheid Museum, did you present it to anybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's November 1994 when I've got it now on A4 paper, like a business plan. It's all right. Let me so it's kind of like a business plan on A4 paper, and Ace Magashule, my family is I married Shirley, so Shirley is from Bloemfontein, but through that family circle in Bloemfontein, I end up with Ace Magashule.
The current Secretary General of the ANC.
The current Secretary General of the ANC. And he is in my home in or about November of 1994. And I present this idea. At this particular time, you would remember that the provinces are struggling to draw people. So he sees the value in this, and I'm invited to Bloemfontein to make a presentation to the provincial government. The premier at that time is Monsieur Lekota. He's the premier at that time, and Ace Magashule is the tourism MEC. Okay, so then I go and I do that presentation, and it goes up to a point where things fall apart within the African National Congress, and you would remember then that whole administration falls down, and I think it's Thero Lekota is replaced by Ivy Motsepe-Kasaburi. Okay, forgive me on the years. This is a very long time ago.
Totally understand.
So that whole arrangement, it was pretty advanced actually, and there's a whole lot of documentation that kind of falls away. But then it gives me the opportunity between 1994 and 1998. I then develop enough to be able to develop a prospectus, which is by far more significant than what I had given to Ace Magashule and Watchko. So, but it's a registered trademark, right? By the time I'm presenting that. I'm registered in 1990. When I get to 1998 and this, I registered the second. Do you know how trademarks work? The one was registered Education and Entertainment Class 41, and then after I did this, I registered it in 1998 as well. So this was ready in 1998. Yeah.
And this was after you have done a presentation to the provincial government of the Free State?
Okay, now, this document is spread throughout South Africa. It's not just given to the Free State. Its proposition is, which province would like this? That's the proposition. It's so you bid for this. But everybody got this. I've got letters from the Western Cape. I've got letters from Mpumalanga. I've got letters that say, hey, thank you very much. We've received your prospectus.
All right.
Okay.
So in other words, after having presented both trademarks, they were well received by the provincial government of Wesley in the Free State and elsewhere.
They were well?
Were they well received?
So the first person to call us to do a presentation is the Bloemfontein, at that time it was called the Bloemfontein Transitional Local Council. Okay, so we sit in the council. I hire somebody to go along with me, and we go and we do a presentation, and everybody's sitting with this prospectus, and they're going through it, and they're grilling me on how this is going to be executed. And this is in the year 2000. At the end of that, they take a resolution to build the Apartheid Museum in Bloemfontein. And the estimated budget is 1 billion rand.
Okay, so Mike Stainbank, you You have just taken through the process of having to register the trademark, and it was well received. The Free State government decided to build a 1 billion museum.
And yeah, I don't know if that the Bloemfontein Transitional Local Council, which is kind of apart from the province, if you see what I'm saying, of the Free State. So they took the resolution to build it.
All right.
And it's a bit technical, but that's the truth of it.
Okay. So who are the other members of the executive who were kind of like, happy with the idea of having to create something such as this and, perhaps provided support in a way?
No, I don't think that that's correct to say that there was anybody in the executive that was excited. There's a list of people here in this who have received this document. And so certainly all of the top hierarchy had received the document. Okay, so about that is clear. But the idea that anybody in the African National Congress came forward and said, yes, some money or do this, no. None of that happened with the African National Congress. But President Nelson Mandela did, in fact, respond to having received it, and he concluded his letter by saying, I think that this would be good for nation building.
And what transpired then after?
There was actually the letter. I'm glad you asked that question, because the letter then speaks of my making an opportunity to meet with the Department of Arts and Culture, who is working on a similar project called Freedom Park. Now you have to be careful about that. That's a very good question. That letter is dated 1999. Okay, that's January 1999. Yes, it's 29th of January 1999. Well, how is the president speaking of Freedom Park then in 1999 when Freedom Park was given to the gambling board in 1997 by Gold Reef City Casino?
Okay, take us through.
Do you follow the contradiction there? Do you follow the contradiction?
No,
I'm saying that in 1997, Gold Reef City Casino documented the fact that they are building Freedom Park. Where did they get it from? It is credited to Abe and Solly Kroc, Freedom Park. So in 1990, Mr. Mandela directs me to have a discussion with the Department of Arts and Culture, who is working on Freedom Park, but that can't be possible. But then, by then, the plot was hatched, isn't it?
And why would you say the plot was hatched?
The plot was hatched in the sense that you just put together the years. Here we have a situation in which Gold Reef City Casino in 1997 have presented Freedom Park. Okay? So, you have Mr. Mandela writing to me about the Apartheid Museum and recommending me to the Department of Arts and Culture for Freedom Park. So the plot was hatched between them that Gold Reef City Casino is going to steal the trademark, and Freedom Park is going to steal the intellectual property that is in here. And if you go to Freedom Park and you ask Thabo Mbeki and Wally Serote to tell you the truth about Freedom Park, they're not going to tell you the truth. The truth of the matter is that they sat around it together with the Jews of Gold Reef City Casino, and they made the firm decision that this is what they're going to do. Freedom Park is a manifestation of what they did. What I did is I took this particular prospectus of mine, and I took what Freedom Park had put out eventually, and I took what Gold Reef City Casino had put out as their version. What Gold Reef City Casino put out as their version of the Apartheid Museum was 5 photocopy pages, which if I gave that assignment to you today, you could put that together by 4 o'clock this afternoon by going on the internet. So they put to the court 5 pages of photocopies of Nelson Mandela and what in the Apartheid Museum.
Now, right. In one of the books I read by Professor Zixmda, he documents of a meeting that said where I think I was invited, and also there was Mr. John Kani and along with the
Yes.
with the Koch brothers. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
The owners of the Gold Reef City.
Yes.
Do you have any idea what happened
Yes,
there?
yes. That was an endorsement meeting where the Koch brothers figured that one of the things that they should do is get the blessing of Nelson Mandela. Zakes describes it as an opportunity for Mr. Mandela to endorse the Apartheid Museum. Okay? So what then happens in that circumstance is that in that meeting is John Carney, and Jason describes it as him, John Carney, and the rest were white. He describes them as the movers and shakers were all white, and John and I were just to present the black face to the man, to the great man Mandela. So he says, but the movers and shakers were all white. It's important that you read those 4 pages. But basically that's what. But so what then happens is that the ANC gets in cahoots with the owners of the Gold Reef City Casino license in helping them to fulfill the obligation of 3 years to complete what was Freedom Park. Have you got that?
I do, absolutely. Now, you've also mentioned something about Gold Reef City in one of your tweets, of course,
Yes.
where you've been stating that they were awarded a license illegally by the Gambling Board of Gauteng.
Yes, I've got that in a document. There's a document that is written to Dan Mzizi from the Gauteng Gambling Board. The document, I've got it on the website, you could have a look at it. But essentially, the document speaks to them about why are you keeping me out? This guy is the monitor for the Gauteng Gambling Board. He says you're on a 3-year deadline to complete Freedom Park. The subject heading is called Freedom Park. You're on a 3-year deadline, and then you're not inviting me to the meetings to show us the progress of what you're doing. And I'm warning you that if you leave me out of this thing, don't suffer the idea that we're going to give you their license. Because you're not supposed to change the storyline, you're not supposed to do anything. These are the regulations of the letter you can read for yourself. But that's what it essentially says. But the reason why that is happening is because they're stealing the trademark. They've changed from Freedom Park. They're doing the Apartheid Museum. Had I come to know about that, there would have been hell to play. The first time I hear about the Apartheid Museum at Gold Reef City Casino is the 2nd of December 2001. They've opened the Koch brothers. The Sunday Times says the Sunday Times says the Apartheid Museum was conceived by business tycoons Abe and Solly Koch as a carrot to be dangled before the Gauteng Gambling Board. It's a blatant lie. The document says Freedom Park. It's a blatant lie. And the idea, then they massage Freedom Park into, actually it was about the Apartheid Museum. The person that they hire to do Freedom Park is Claude Grundman, Miss Claude Grundman. She's an Israeli woman living in France. And she's the person that does the presentation to the Gauteng Gambling Board about how she's going to develop what? Freedom Park, not the Apartheid Museum.
Now, before we get into that,
yes,
you indicated that the former head of state,
yes,
the head of the executive,
yes,
Nelson Mandela,
yes,
wrote a letter directing you to the Department of Arts and Culture,
yes,
saying that you need to have a discussion with them because there was already an idea or a similar plan to develop something of your concept. How then did you respond to that?
I didn't respond at all. There was nothing to say. Where am I going to go to the Department of Arts and Culture for? I have what I'm doing. And if you see what I'm saying, I have what I'm doing. I did end up at the Department of Arts and Culture, but not with the idea of what you call, because they were intent on, they had it. Don't you see that? And to have brought me in, why? Thabo, I don't know how to get to answering your question. What would I be doing with people who are stealing my stuff, and why would those people invite me in to steal the stuff? So when I got to the Department of Arts, there was nothing I got from the Department of Arts and Culture. There's nothing. But I got nothing because they were stealing it. Now I want to refer you to a book that is written by Sabine Marshall. I think she got her doctoral thesis. I've written it down. I can give it to you afterwards. If you read that book, one of the things she says, I went there to do my doctoral research. And when I got there, I couldn't find anybody to talk to me. Everybody feels like they're hiding something. She says it. I've never met the woman before. She puts that in her doctoral thesis. She says, I couldn't understand, I could never understand. Here am I writing a thesis that would help the government, but everybody clammed up on me. Sabine Marshall, Professor Sabine Marshall. It's an important book to read for the student that wants to know the truth.
All right, and also in the same subject, you mentioned that Dr. John Kane was invited to this meeting.
John Kane was in the meeting according to Zakes-Mda.
As what? Doing what exactly?
Well, what they had done was they had pulled together some people to piece together, to help them to develop. Now that they've decided to steal, so they have an educational committee that's going to prepare the Apartheid Museum. And the evidence that we presented to the court is the evidence of Solly Croc bursting into the room. And it's under oath by Lesego wa Lesego. He says Solly Croc bursts into the room and says, forget everything about Freedom Park. This is becoming the Apartheid Museum. While they were working on Freedom Park, and they explained to him, but we're so far ahead on Freedom Park, what's going to forget everything?
So, Bro Mike, talking about Gold Reef City, you have mentioned that in their presentation at the Gambling Board, they made it very clear in their proposal that they were going to build the Freedom Park as part of the social contribution to the community. But now they have the Apartheid Museum. So how did we move from Freedom Park to the Apartheid Museum?
I often refer to it as the great Jewish heist. And the reason I do that is because there's a journalist by the name of Jeremy Gordon. And if you could ever pick up that article, it's dated the 18th of November 2001. And what he comes out and he says is that Abe and Solly Croc conceived the Apartheid Museum after a visit to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. So what they do by that is to develop a narrative that seems to suggest that it's the Jewish experience of the Holocaust that inspired Abe and Solly Croc to conceive the Apartheid Museum. Now that is one hell of a big Jewish collaboration to deprive me of my property. When they speak of that in 2001, they're using the exact words of my trademark, and my trademark was registered in 1990. And this idea that the Apartheid Museum originates in the minds of Abe and Solly Croc is a total Jewish fabrication. And everybody else then picks up on that and gives it that kind of emotional spin that goes along with the Jewish story. So that is, like I say, the great Jewish heist as far as I'm concerned.
So in your knowledge, Pramike, how then do these guys obtain the license? How then do they get awarded with this license?
By way of a fraudulent arrangement with the Gauteng Gambling Board. You see, what you must, one of the things that I'd want to explain to you is that a gambling license is a public license. It belongs to the people. So the Gambling Board essentially can be called the police to ensure that the gambling license is handed to what they call fit and proper persons. But by virtue, and let me mention the names here. Leading the Gauteng Gambling Board at the time as chairman is Advocate Vincent Maleka, SC. And his deputy is Ishmael Semenya, SC, Advocate Ishmael Semenya, SC. So in terms of your question, they were given a temporary license to build Freedom Park. Okay? So then what happens is that they come into possession of my prospectus in 1998. Remember, they then given Freedom Park, they must build it within 3 years, right? So my prospectus is in the marketplace in 1998. And then that they decide that this is what they're going to steal. So the only way that they were given, so the license is given fraudulently. It's a fraudulent transaction, the confirmation of the license. So they're sitting with the temporary license, and the agreement is they're going to build Freedom Park, you following, within 3 years, and they do not complete Freedom Park. They abandon Freedom Park, and they steal my trademark, the Apartheid Museum. And so to answer your question directly, it's a fraudulent transaction that gives them the license. And the responsibility for that lays squarely on the Gauteng Gambling Board.
Now, with the emergence of such a heist, did you bring this matter before the judiciary for their intervention?
Yes, indeed. So my case is based on the fact that I own the registered trademark, the Apartheid Museum. Can I repeat that? I own the registered trademark, the Apartheid Museum. In fact, at the time that the litigation pursues, I own the registered trademark in 2 classes, in class 41 and class 35. And those are services trademarks. And I'll get to explain services trademarks later on. So the litigation begins in 2002, and it's from that day that the corruption within the judiciary becomes, from that day up to today. That lie has been perpetuated less by the casino but by the judiciary. That blatant lie has carried through. And South Africans have a way of reading judges as being men and women of integrity, not on our experience. The South African judiciary is corrupt to the core.
Now, can you take us through the series of the court processes that unfolded there?
Oh, that's also a very good question. The first case is the first case ends up with Justice Brian Southwood. Let me give you a bit of background on Justice Brian Southwood. In 1988, Abraham and Solomon Crock took a case to the Supreme Court. And the case was against an American woman on the product that she created in America called Hollywood Curl. The case is called, the citation is Hollywood Curl versus Twins. Now, the Kroc brothers owned Hollywood. They used to have Hollywood skincare. They called it skincare, but they put hydroquinone and mercury into to dehumanize black people. And you've seen chubabas and all. We've all, in the township, we all know what that does to black skin. Now, that particular, what I refer to as the seminal case, says to the Supreme Court of Appeal, at that time called the Appellate Division, says that the exclusive rights of a trademark cannot be taken away by a company. You cannot register a company using somebody else's trademark. The advocate representing the Kroc brothers in the Supreme Court of Appeal is Advocate Brian Southwood. Okay? The attorney the instructing attorney is Attorney Owen Salmon. Now fast forward from 1988, I beg your pardon, to 2002. Guess what happens? Justice Southwood is sitting as a judge, and Attorney Salmon is now an advocate. Okay? So what then happens is the Kroc's former legal representative is now a judge, and they bring in the advocate. I just need to get in depth to that case to show you where the corruption in the judiciary starts. Yes. Our case is set down for the 17th of June 2003. 17th of June, it's set down for hearing as an opposed case. Counsel comes from Cape Town for me. Okay. When we get to the courtroom, the papers happen to be paginated wrongly. There's a funny thing that happens. The judge that is sitting with that says that he can't get through the papers because Gold Reef City Casino's papers are paginated badly. And when I say badly, I don't mean page 2 is page 3. I mean that page 2 is sitting at page 45. So in other words, the bad pagination was a deliberate attempt to force the court into adjourning the matter. But what the judge does, the one that adjourns it, he says, I will set it down for, I know you guys want to get this over with, I'll set it down for Friday the 20th of June. Now, I can tell you this, but at that particular, I can tell you this now, but it's evidence that has built up. At that particular time, I can't tell you that I was wise to the deceit. But then he says an amazing thing. We'll set it down for Southwood for Friday. Now, the amazing thing about Friday, Brother Thabo, is that Friday in the Pretoria High Court is reserved for urgent matters and divorces. And because the court is reserved for urgent matters and divorces, it then means that the courthouse is basically empty. There's a whole lot of empty courtrooms. When we arrive there on the 20th, I'm walking with counsel and we go through and we're looking for the roll. But we're not on this roll. And we look, but we're not here. Where are we? But then we get, hey, guys, we're here. That's Gold Reef City Casino's attorney. But we're not suspicious of anything at that particular time. There's no suspicion in our minds. You know, there's no question about why it's not on the road because you're not suspicious. So we walk into the courtroom and then we're sitting and Southwood walks in on his own, still not suspicious. We're not suspicious at that particular time. He walks in on his own. I'll tell you what happened. What they did was they figured that the courtrooms would be empty. And the judge put on his robe, and what was there was a mock trial. There was never a court case set down by the judge president for that court. Please, I hope that you have I explained that correctly? You're following me?
Yes.
What it was a judge putting on a robe and pretending that he has been allocated a case in an empty courtroom. That is what happened on that day. And he does, in fact, issue a judgment against me. Now, there's an amazing thing about that. The one way to know that it was never allocated to him, there's no recording on that day. There's no recording of the court case on that day. So when you place the appeal, there's no record of what took place in the courtroom on that day. It was what you might want to refer to as what we'd call it a spaza court case. So beyond the, it's not, I want to use the word irregular. It's not irregular. It is criminal. A criminal offense took place in, and I like to express it the way, in your courts under a constitutional democracy. Now, the significance of that is not only the fact that he formerly represented the Kroc brothers. It's in total contradiction to his own argument in the Supreme Court of Appeal. It completely overturns everything that he told the Supreme Court of Appeal against, the woman's name was Vida Kanika Martins of Hollywood Curl, when she registered the company Hollywood Curl Pty Limited. So what was in the papers was that the Crocs were involved in the registration of the company. The Crocs initiated the company, the South African Apartheid Museum at Freedom Park. It was the company that was presented to the court litigating against me. Now, for Southwood, as a judge, the crime appears on the first page. When he read that this is an expungement of the trademark, the Apartheid Museum, he was looking at the applicant who was a criminal. The applicant, he needed to ask, how were you able to register a company using an existing trademark? How could you possibly have done that? Because that was exactly our argument in the Supreme Court of Appeal. How could you have done that? Now people go, he should have recused himself. It's not just a question of, there's three questions. He comes into the court as a criminal. That's one. The second thing is that he goes against statutory law. It doesn't, I'm going to make it get a whole lot worse. Walking with him is a director of Nedbank.
Who is this director of Nedbank?
His name is Donald Lindsay McRobert. He's a director at Nedbank. Nedbank owns the firm of Edward Nathan Friedland Pty Limited. So it's Nedbank's firm. It's not a firm of attorneys. So Advocate Southwood stands in that court without an instructing attorney. There is no instructing attorney for Advocate Salmon on that particular day. It is Don McRobert of Edward Nathan Friedland Pty Limited, and Edward Nathan Friedland Pty Limited at that time is a law consultancy firm and not a firm of attorneys with the proper qualification, and there's a ruling in that respect.
Now you make two, overwhelming points. First, it is an individual pretending to be allocated a case.
Yes.
And he or she presides over your case.
Brian Southwood, yes.
Justice?
Brian Southwood.
Brian Southwood.
Yes.
He puts on a rope.
Yes.
And it goes to court.
Yes.
Deliver a judgment.
Yes.
And you discovered he was not even allocated the case.
Yes.
And on another point, you've mentioned that there was an advocate without an instructing attorney.
Without an instructing attorney.
Now, having all these, situation right before you,
yes.
Did you try, from the part of your counsel, of course, to challenge that?
Well, that's the point I'm trying to make to you. You're not suspicious. I don't know all of this at that particular time. It's my staying with the case and my own private investigations that lead me to that way after the fact. So it's kind of like, and I can't remember the exact date, and so I write to the registrar, and I said to the librarian actually, and I say to the librarian, on this particular day, this case was heard in the court. The librarian writes back to me, and the librarian says, you have to be mistaken. What was the case about? I said, the case, the South African Apartheid Museum at Freedom Park versus Mike Stainbank for the expungement of the trademark. And she says, there's no such case. So I said, what you mean? I was there in the courtroom. She says, you have to be mistaken, sir. The Fridays in the Pretoria High Court are reserved for urgent matters and divorces only. So from that first day, that first expungement of my trademark is a criminal arrangement between a sitting judge and his former clients.
So at a later stage, Trademark, you discovered the fact that there were some fraudulent processes that unfolded. And your investigation led you to believing actually that there was not even a case allocated. And this is how, as you explained, this is what really happened. So what then happened after that?
No, I find out this much later, even after my appeal. So when I lose the case in Southwood's court and the judgment is handed down on the 17th of July, right? All right. So I lose that. My trademark is expunged. I appeal that case. I appeal that to Southwood. Now, an amazing thing happens. Southwood, they tell me, at the time of my appeal, is doing service in the Supreme Court of Appeal. Okay? And he can't hear my appeal. That in itself is an unusual development in the sense that I am appealing to the court that listened to the case. All right? That your judgment is in fact incorrect on these particular grounds. Then I'm told, no, he's on duty in the Supreme Court of Appeal. My case would be heard by Clarkson. Now here's an amazing, and that turns out to be November the 21st, 2003. Could you please check November the 21st, 2003? I'll tell you what it's going to reveal. Guess what? It's a Friday.
Okay.
Why would you schedule a case for a Friday when the court is reserved for urgent matters only and divorces? How is my case scheduled for a Friday? On the version of the librarian, everybody knows that the Pretoria High Court is reserved for urgent matters and divorces on a Friday. How does my case get allocated to a Friday on 2 Fridays?
Okay.
And how is it that the judge that I'm supposed to... Now, in the appeal, if you're doing an appeal, one of the things to do is to transcribe the record, especially if you have another judge. But there's no record.
So your appeal was denied on those bases?
Not on what basis?
On the basis of the fact that, they couldn't hear.
No, not on that basis. He just refused to accept any of the arguments and find Southwood right in every respect. Do you follow? So there's no question of introducing the record or anything like that. Because, Thabo, by the time I get to the appeal, I don't know everything that happened. I don't know. And that's the point I'm trying to make to you. I do not know at that point that Southwood is a criminal. I find that out much, much later. Do you follow?
Yeah.
It's much later as I begin my investigations. So the appeal goes ahead, right? The appeal goes ahead. Please follow me slowly. The appeal goes ahead because I don't know that. That's how criminal the deceit is. I don't know that. It doesn't enter my mind that a judge could possibly do that. It never entered the mind of my counsel. Do you follow what I'm saying? So then I go to the appeal on Friday, the 21st of November, 2003, and I lose that. And I appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Right? And don't make the assumption that I know. I don't know that this deceit goes like that. So I make the appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal and they dismiss my case without reasons.
No reason provided.
No reason provided for why.
Is that usual for a court?
It's a strange thing because a couple of people said that it's unconstitutional. what's his name? There's a guy on Twitter that raised Ngolwane. Yes, he raised that question. You go through all of that trouble preparing thing that you have a point, and the court rejects you without reasons. But there's a lovely thing about the Supreme Court of Appeal that you should know. The judgment and the decision is not signed off by the judges, the two judges that considered your case. So you get two judges who are supposed to look at your case and decide that you've got a case. Those two judges decide that you've got no case. But then when you get the order is not signed by the judges.
Signed by who?
It's by the registrar.
And what did that mean to you?
It's one line. And it says, your application for leave to appeal has been denied. Your petition for leave to appeal, because the High Court didn't grant permission for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal. So you petition the Supreme Court of Appeal, which goes to the question, that discussion that we had earlier on when I was saying to you that this case for 20 years has been denied leave to appeal from the High Court for 20 years. And I put a challenge to you. You'll never find a trademark case that has been refused leave to appeal from the High Court.
I think, Brother Mike, I really want to ask this question.
Yes.
With the flawed legal system and, you having been subjected to this unfair treatment by the courts,
Yes.
the fraud that you have mentioned here,
Yes.
how do you feel about it? And maybe the follow-up question would be, where to from now? What is it that needs to be done, especially from your part, because this is your battle. You understand it better than anyone.
Well, I myself, I think as Sobukwe felt, when I think about our so-called democracy, what we introduced in 1994, according to the African National Congress, is a constitutional democracy. These 20 years that my family has been through with the South African judiciary, I am telling you now, it is rotted and corrupted to the absolute core. And if you understand constitutionalism and the rule of law, it on the facts of my case and our case, it has collapsed the democracy. You do not have, you're living under a criminal regime. You do not have de jure a constitutional democracy. You have a de facto regime operating as though it's a constitutional democracy. It is not anywhere, on the facts of this case, nowhere near it.
Now, Brother Mike, there are other Chapter 9 institutions that exist in the country, such as that of the Public Protector.
Yes.
Have you, at some point, tried to bring this matter to the attention of the Public Protector?
I went to, so I'm taking you through the processes of my investigations. When I found Hollywood Curl versus Twins, and there are other cases of companies using other people's trademarks, while the trademark is of full force and effect on the trademark register. There are others. But for me, it was the fact that I found the one that involves the Kroc brothers, who said that they were able to do this. So when I went to the Register of Companies to ask them to give me the inception file, in other words, the forms that were filled in, right? For 2 years, they gave me the runaround, not giving me those papers. I then went to the Public Protector, who at that time was Tuli Madonsela, and I said to her that I need these papers. The commissioner at the time, in 2012, she secures that file for me on the 7th of May 2012. And I'm sitting with the representative of the Public Protector's investigator, George Matimolane. Yeah, I'm with George. So what we do is we take the file. It's 81 pages. It is an absolute and palpable fraud. absolute and palpable fraud. And the point here is, first, you have to accept, in terms of that finding of the Supreme Court of Appeal and in terms of statutory law, trademarks enjoy exclusive protection. So I'll go to that phrase again. Not only can it not exist in law, it also does not exist on paper. So what then, when they gave me the file, I said, thank you, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, I now have the file, but I've got to bring it back to you because they've lied to you. This is a fraud. You can't, it's illegal to lie to the public protector. And I chased and begged Thuli Madonsela for 4 years. I begged her to investigate that for 4 years until she left office.
So she refused to investigate?
She refused to investigate the fraudulent file.
Did she ever substantiate as to why she would not?
No, she wouldn't. And I found the letter that I wrote to her, and you're welcome to have that letter that I wrote to her. And she left office without investigating that particular fraudulent file. It stands up to now. It's with the current public protector, fortunately.
So after everything that has gone down, what happened then? You're sitting here today. On one of your tweets, I saw you touching on the issue of prison sentence that was handed down by a court. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, you must remember now that I have two trademarks. So they went and expunged my first trademark, right? Now, what then happened, and I'm going to prove this point to you, is that I then go to register my company in 2009. My company is called the Apartheid Museum Pty Limited and the Apartheid Museum Foundation. And you really need to follow me closely here, because I don't know why it is that people struggle with what is a trademark and what is a company. Those are two different things.
Take us through.
And the king is the trademark. It's not the company. It's the trademark. So what then happens is that I then want to register my two companies, the Apartheid Museum Pty Limited and the Apartheid Museum Foundation. The registrar writes back and says, we already have a company. So I write back and I say, here's my trademark certificate.
And what is the response?
I get registered. My two companies are registered, which proves the point that my companies are registered. My two companies are registered. I give you the registration numbers. They are registered. The argument falls flat on the point that I produce my trademark. My 1998 trademark. Remember, my first one's 1990. So by the time I register my 1998 trademark is not expunged, and I present my trademark. That's proof of the fact that I'm telling you. The trademark exists, and he has no option but to register my companies. But what has he done? What has the registrar done by this? You now have two separate people who are sitting with companies on his trademark register. The African National Congress, cadre deployment. I don't think you guys understand this thing. Cadre deployment is not about executing the policies of the African National Congress. Cadre deployment is about being able to retain the criminality within the African National Congress. So the registrar corrupted the trademarks register, and he corrupted the company register by registering this company. And I'm saying registering in the wrong phrase, because it was never registered. When he received those papers, because when you apply to expunge my trademark, you then have to notify on the papers it's Stainbank, right? And then it would be the Register of Companies, because then the judgment goes to the registrar and he's got to expunge the trademark. When he received the judgment, he had no company called the South African Apartheid Museum at Freedom Park. There was no such company on the company register. There was no such company on the company. How many times do you want me to say that to you?
So, Brother Mike,
so my prison sentence, sorry to go to you. So my prison sentence, to get to the question of my prison sentence, I'm saying to you that my prison sentence was not a strategy on the part of Gold Reef City Casino alone. It was the statement that they asked me to sign was a statement that would have exonerated all of the criminals, and including the criminals on the judiciary. That was the point of the prison sentence, that I would be too scared to go to prison and I would then sign the document that they prepared for me.
What was contained in this document?
Essentially, stop calling them fraudsters. The document is the court case is 37609 of 2014, and I'd advise you to take a look at it. So she paints this pictures of this insane man that calls George Bezos a criminal and everybody else at Gold Reef City Casino a criminal. The fact of the matter is that that was a strategy on their part to have white media waiting to be able to say that he's finally apologized, this guy that's kind of lost his nut. And then I let them down and I said, I'm not signing it. And she says to me, you'll go to prison. And I said, I will go to prison. You do what you got to do. She said, I'll give you another 15 days. I don't need your 15 days. I'm never signing that.
So you never signed?
I never signed that. And one of the lovely things, and when I speak of BHK as I do, if there were 50 people in the courtroom, there must have been 45 who said, just sign the damn thing. And when I was refusing, I got BHK support. Don't sign it, Brother Mike.
Okay, so there was also an amount of money you were supposed to pay. If I recall, it was 5.7 million that you needed to pay to...
Oh, that is even the prison sentence now, you're looking at a gap of 2003 to 2000, and the prison sentence comes in 2014. Right? That's an extraordinary gap. There's a whole lot of court cases in between there, including the Constitutional Court. So you have the Constitutional Court on 2 occasions faced. I quite like that example because it connected with you. The Constitutional Court is sitting with a situation in which says, my name is Thabo Makwankwa and I'm a 14-year-old and I have a Code 10 driver's license. The Constitutional Court looked at that and said, that's fine, young Thabo. How is that possible? The South African Apartheid Museum at Freedom Park, 8 words, 200101910808 does not exist in law and it does not exist on paper. And the 1,200 advocates of the Johannesburg Society of Advocates need to show me when they recommended Kitely, the woman that put me in prison. They have a responsibility to go out and pick up that inception file and bring it to you, to me, and show us that fraudulent inception file before they recommended a criminal to sit on the bench.
Bro Mike, you keep referring to this group of
people who want to take away your life. You keep saying that these people will kill me on Twitter. Everybody says that on Twitter. Who are these people you think might want to kill you and why?
Who are the people that might want to?
Want to kill you.
There have been 2 attempts on my life. The first one, I was driving with my son in the car and this BMW hit us from the back. The second one was a break-in into my house when I wasn't there. But when you have, there's a normal kind of a conditioning when you're living in the northern suburbs and you have a break-in. It's some guys on drugs from Alex or something like that. That's the normal thing. These guys came in with that thing that you see on TV, with people in shoes covered in plastics like this and fully covered. And once they got in, fortunately I was not in the house, it was my son with Metabisile in the house. And they said, "Where's Mike?" And they said, "He's not here." And they left without taking anything.
They did not even had your child? Or...
They never took. And that's not, again, every time when I tell you things, I must repeat, that's not my version. And Metabisile is available for you and you could interview her.
Bro Mike, you keep referring to the legal process that you have been subjected to as being fraudulent and criminal, and of course it involves a few people who presided over that. Now, for a layman on the street who doesn't understand anything about what is criminal and what happened there, can you just take us through that road and try to get us to understand?
Well, it's a pity that media doesn't do that for you. Oftentimes you have most people seem to be able to tell you everything that President Jacob Zuma did. Why are they able to tell you that? They're able to tell you that because media invites people to come and explain to you what a criminal Jacob Zuma is. I am telling you the judiciary is criminal. Why is it that media won't call in people to say, go and challenge Mike on what he's saying? Nobody's challenged me on what I'm saying. And I'm the one that's saying that the judiciary is corrupt. But let me take that to another level. You are a voter, right? And I don't know who you voted for. But whoever you voted for is sitting in parliament. And that person is writing the law. Now, you voted for that person, and when you ask that person what is his job, he tells you that he is the servant of the people. All right? So you say to him, "Hello, servant of the people, I put you into parliament because I gave you my vote." This is Bra Mike's allegations against the judiciary. You write the laws. Is Bra Mike right about the fact that trademarks are protected? But I can't get people to ask their elected officials to deal with the issue. Why can't people, why do you vote to put people in parliament and then not hold them accountable to you? Why do you do that? Why do you give up your agency? It's just not, so it's almost as though it's not for me to explain it to you. It's for your parliamentary representative to be able to say that on your behalf.
Bro Mike, you have written to the JSC, to the Chief Justice as well,
Yes.
The affidavits and whatnot that's submitted before the JSC.
He's not denied any allegation.
Have you got any response from them?
I'll say this, I think I've told you this 10 times and I'll give it to you the 11th time. There is not one person who denies anything that I have said. And all of them have got it on affidavit. The Registrar of Companies has got it on affidavit that I call him a criminal. He does not deny that. The Gauteng Gambling Board, I have called them criminal on affidavit. They do not deny one single allegation. The Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors has got the PricewaterhouseCoopers as the supposed independent auditors for a company that doesn't exist. I present this to the Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors, and they do not deny a single allegation. There is nobody that denies a single allegation. But what then happens, and I think it's part of our colonial upbringing, is that people are constantly faced with, but how come the courts ruled against, all these courts ruled against you? And I'm trying to tell you that the courts are corrupt. What more must I say to you? What more must I say to you? They corrupt, they criminals. Come out and just say why. Which part of what I'm saying do you want to dispute? Do you want to dispute the fact that a trademark has exclusive rights? Do you want to dispute that? No. Do you want to dispute the fact that it's a fraudulent document of 81 pages? Go and get it and we can sit with it and I can show you. Let me explain something to you. Gold Reef City Casino hires on their own form. Let me explain this to you. This fraudulent company comes in after Gold Reef City Casino has given instructions by way of a power of attorney, right? Please listen carefully. They give three major law firms the task of registering the South African Apartheid Museum at Freedom Park. 3 on their power of attorney. Now, when they give them the power of attorney, they only give them one name: the South African Apartheid Museum at Freedom Park. Now, how could you possibly have gone to the registrar to give them one name when the registrar requires you to give him 6? So how did you execute that job? But the principal firm there is Edward Nathan Friedland, the Pty Limited, the Nedbank. The core of this corruption is in Nedbank. Nedbank sits at the core of this corruption with Jewish criminal Michael Katz. Michael Katz is the foremost authority on company law and on tax law. If you go to South African Revenue Services and ask them to give you the tax forms for the South African Apartheid Museum at Freedom Park, they do not have them. There is no such thing. The Registrar of Companies did not send that detail to SARS because SARS was already sitting with company registration 2001019108/08. They already had it, and that exists in SA Apartheid Museum. Do you follow that?
Yeah, I do. Correct.
It already existed. So they didn't, you know that when you register a company, the first person that gets your thing is SARS, so that they can come for their taxes. All right? SARS does not have a record of the South African Apartheid Museum at Freedom Park. They've never heard of it.
So in terms of taxation, because I think the question that will come is, how then are they sorting out their taxes if the company does not even exist?
It doesn't exist, Thabo.
So meaning that there is no taxation that actually happens with regards to...
meaning that there's the other company that they borrowed the registration details from. And that company is called SA Apartheid Museum, 3 words. And that happens under Alec Irwin in 2001. However they did it, nobody has seen that inception file. Nobody.
This is overwhelming, Mike. You've been through this. It's traumatic, I can tell. No doubt about that. Do you think there's a legal recourse for you moving forward?
I think that I can't see myself subjecting myself to... I'm walking into a courtroom and I'm looking at the man. I don't know him from a bar of soap, but I know that he belongs to a corrupt institution. And now you asking me, I must go to that man? I know that BHK is planning to expand. I can give them the information they want. If they want to take up a legal challenge against the judiciary, that's their business, and I can give them all of the information. But I'm certainly not going to subject myself to criminals. I'm not prepared to do that.
You've been very consistent in getting the message out there of what has actually happened in your life with this journey of the Apartheid Museum. Yeah. How is the response of people out there on Twitter?
Oh, well, Twitter seems to be very, very, very... I don't know, I know, but my sense of it is that they express their anger. I think that I quite like the interaction that I have with people on Twitter. Oftentimes, there'd be this one, there's a guy that came telling me about John Carney. Oh, I've known John Carney since I was a child or something like that. I said to him, bro, why do you come to me? Why don't you take this information and go and tell John Carney that this is what I said about him, that he's a criminal before he's a house Negro. He's a criminal. John Carney is a criminal as much as Rule Khoza is a criminal. And you take that from me. Why don't you go and ask John? This friend of yours that you've been in school with in New Brighton. Why don't you go and ask him? And then he disappears. Silence. And other than that, it's that kind of foolish interaction that you get. But other than that, there's not a great many people that challenge my version. Nobody challenges my version.
Well, the Insight Factor is here to tell stories from our very own black people. And I hope that John Carney and everyone listening or watching out there will actually come forward to give us their side of the story.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Why?
Because, well, it's not. John, the only reason that John Carney is not in jail is because he's associated with whites. And in South Africa, not even the Hawks have got that kind of power. The Hawks, I have had the opportunity to sit with policemen. And when it dawns on him that he's going to have to arrest a white person, I can see the color pale from his face. I can see him wanting to go to the toilet. It's way beyond his pay grade. He knows it in his head that he can't do that. And the same, I'm saying to you that the same, you've never asked me what was behind the Apartheid Museum. I hope that we get to speak about that.
Absolutely, but you might as well answer the question.
Oh, if you take a look through my prospectus, it says in very, very clear language, the Apartheid Museum does not depend on trinkets and trivia. It was, Thabo, the Apartheid Museum as I had conceived it. The one thing that Gold Reef City Casino did not steal from me was the concept. They stole the trademark. They never stole the concept. And I hate the idea when people say they stole Bra Mike's idea. Oh, I hate that. They never stole my idea. They stole the trademark assisted by the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive.
So for the many people out there, Bra Mike, you want to continue?
I wanted to tell you about the Apartheid Museum. The Apartheid Museum was an opportunity for us to look back on our 400 years and try to assess, as Biko did, what had they done to our minds in these 400 years? Why is it that we live with the idea that these people are superior? Why do we do that? Why do we have to interrogate what I call the pathology of the non-white slave? And I'm putting it to you that what we really have to do to qualify on the judiciary, we have to develop a test that you are either racist or you are pathologically incapacitated. You might have a black skin, but here you're a slave. And that's my submission for all. It's my submission not just for the judiciary. It's my submission because what you have made up of the judiciary is what you call an officer of the court. Every officer of the court is responsible for the judiciary. You may be a judicial officer, you may be a lawyer, you may be an advocate, but you are an officer of the court. You cannot possibly listen to this that I'm giving you now and still have somebody sitting there, a perception of black but is really pathologically incapable of, what does it say? The oath of office, without fear, favor, or prejudice. So I'm saying to those judges, they were looking at me and they couldn't hold these criminals accountable because they mentally incapacitated. And if you go through the Judicial Services Act, a judge can be removed for incapacity, any incapacity. And I would extend that. When Parliament does not intervene, I will extend that to Parliament and the executive. I keep on saying to you, Parliament is really a mixture of racists and non-white slaves, house Negroes. I say the same thing about the judiciary, and I'll tell you the same thing about the executive. Nobody's faced up to these 400 years that we've been through. What's Biko's favorite? The most important, potent weapon in the hands of the oppressed is the mind of the oppressor. In the hands of the oppressor is the mind. And my thesis has proved that.
Now, Mike Stainbank, before we conclude, I want you to actually, communicate with the viewers at home. How do they access your documents? How do they speak to you? How do they get in touch with you? Should they want to know more about Mike Stainbank?
One of my emails addresses, and I know people. I've been criticized for my website address, and I've been criticized for my email address. One of the email addresses is questions@fraud2001-019-108-08.org.za. Now, I'll tell you why I've been criticized. I'm trying to focus people's minds that once you investigate those numbers that I've given you, the heart of the case is rested in that. The heart of the case is rested in those numbers, 2001-019-108-08. That, once I've given you to that and you begin to investigate that, you're going to find yourself a minefield that leads me to the point that says the South African Apartheid Museum at Freedom Park is figment in the imagination of a judiciary corrupted by Gold Reef City Casino.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mike Stainbank. And for the viewers at home, I know you've got many questions that you need to ask. Please visit the website that he just mentioned now, and you can follow him on Twitter at Mike Stainbank.
It's Define Racism 1.
At Define Racism 1. Thank you so much. This was the Inside Factor exclusive interview with Mike Stainbank. We are unfiltered and uncensored. Till we meet again. Thank you very much for watching.